So welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today we are joined by David from CounterCraft, who's the CEO. So welcome, David.
Thanks very much, Jordan. Pleasure to be here.
So maybe you can start by telling us like a little bit about CounterCraft and who you guys serve.
Thank you. So CounterCraft, we're an organization that provides threat intelligence through deception. So that sounds really James Bond-like, doesn't it? What it is we do, my customers typically are people like nation states, large financial institutions, large manufacturers around the world. And we either deploy something on the network that looks like it's really valuable. So, Jordan, it could be where's all your personal information? It could be, where's the repository that has the secret recipe for Coca-Cola or the 11 herbs and spices.
Sure.
And when bad people are on the network, well, that box looks much more interesting than the real thing. Obviously, there's a clever link with Coke there, wasn't it? And so they come into my deception environment, which means I take them off of your network. They're in my space. They're off your network. And then I'll tell you everything about them in real time so you can throw them off the network and make sure they never come back. That's the simplistic overview for the network stuff. And then the cloud facing bit we do with deception. What we do is pretend to be your organization or somebody who looks exactly like you, maybe with a vulnerability that you want to just check to see. And as the bad guys come trying to break into this cloud environment that isn't the real thing at all, I'll occupy them, I'll keep them busy, and all at the same time, I'll give you their exact playbook. So again, you can harden your defenses in real time.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like you act as like a trap for a lot of these nefarious actors, and then okay.
So people talk about honeypots, right? So you could look at us as being a honeypot, but a honeypot on steroids, because if you're an attacker, you'll just see a honeypot. They're easy to spot. They're like dark, vacuous spaces on a network. With ours, you come inside and it's alive. You'll see people typing in browsers. You'll see databases opening and closing. You'll see bits of information that look like they might be interesting. Jordan's contact lists or secret recipes so you might want to try and sneak that out. And all of that helps me figure out who you are and where those things might surface.
Wow. So you mentioned that you are a little bit like a James Bond agency where you deal with nation states and some pretty big companies. Are there any interesting stories behind that you're able to share and you don't have to kill me at the end?
What could I tell you that I don't have to kill you? Yeah, actually we do. So the cloud-facing one is the interesting one. About a year ago, and I always tell the stories like, so you've heard of an organization called Fortinet. They produce lots of firewalls and routers and stuff like that. So there was a vulnerability in one of their products, which is a gateway between you and the outside world to a firewall. And with a large UK financial services think tank called CDA, we built a fake building society, so a small savings and loan type organization with a typical back office and this device protecting it from the internet. Pretended to base it in the UK in a place called Norwich, gave it a fake building society name, but it was registered in all the kind of normal ways. And that stuff sounds complex, but it took us less than a week to do. Day 2 of going live, we saw the bots crawling all over this office looking for the vulnerability. Day 3, we found the IP address of a guy from Russia coming in and using that vulnerability, then sniffing around inside our fake building society branch office records, files, see who they were connected to, doing all those things. And in my world, we talk about TTPs, and so tactics, techniques, and profiles and stuff. So we had this whole playbook of how they use this exploit to get in, which we had in a shareable file format within an hour or so. So same day we've got that. And we gave that to our sort of friends and families and wrote it up as a case history and all those things. 6 months later, we find the Chinese are using exactly the same exploit to break into Department of Homeland. So we found out 6 months ahead. There's one. Another one, we worked with a UK crime agency. We built a fake manufacturing site, which the third largest ransomware gang came along. They encrypted everything, the manufacturing lines, the office, the financial systems, the everything. The only thing is none of it actually existed. It was all stuff that we emulated, built in the cloud. We kept that running. We kept that deception running with them for 4 weeks. So for 4 weeks, they thought they'd locked up everything for this manufacturing company. And if we'd met in a bar, I'd be joking that we made €100 profit. The whole game blew up in the end because client, or we don't have the ability to pay the ransomware because we don't have a cryptocurrency wallet.
Yeah.
So they opened one with €100 in it. And at that point, we figured we couldn't keep this deception running any longer, collapsed it. So the pub story would be we went down to the pub and drank the €100. But the reality is it disappeared off to some. And what did we get in the everything, absolutely everything about them. So when they didn't have their VPNs on and when they were bad practice, it can tell you what their home IP address was, tell you what their tags were. From their tags, we can tell you what their taste in music was like, as well as the entire playbook that they use, which could be used to harden other people. And there's not a lot you can do. Some of the things we've done have led to some interesting prosecutions. And in this one, all you can do is just publish all the information that flames that group. That group then suffers a great embarrassment, has to disband and start all over again, which is at a nation state level considered to be a tactical win. Both of those instances we can talk about. Yeah, nothing was real. Nothing was real. We absolutely got everything about the adversary.
Fascinating. It's so difficult for me to wrap my brain around that. For anybody listening, David, that maybe runs a small, medium-sized business and isn't a nation state, what are some mistakes that they might make in their security that would allow for an attacker to come in and easily steal things that are of value from them? Is there like a super common thing that you see?
So we don't go to that market at the moment. I mean, we're just rolling out a managed service provider thing, which will take us to a mid-market. And over time, we will go to more of an SME market. But actually, the thing that I find is everywhere, even in the larger companies, it's about data hygiene. It's the things like not changing your passwords, not having locked down privileges and things. People just leave it default and admin, whether it's the Wi-Fi routers that they use or the firewalls or passwords to their best applications. They tend to not move outside of admin. Scary fact, tell you a scary fact, 80% of the population who has, and I'm sure you must have like a credit card or a debit card. 80% of the population of the world uses the same PIN number for everything.
Wow.
Don't answer that. Don't look up. Don't do the eye thing. So, really?
80%, that's pretty staggering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just change them up a bit. And then when I talk about hygiene and stuff like that, if you think about it, it's not that hard. And we were chatting about what browser are you using for recording this? Google, if you use Chrome, all of them. Password managers, put some encrypted password in, use your password manager to store your generate and store passwords. Just use QWERTY or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Don't do those things. It will make life more difficult for the majority of people who may want to to come and steal from you, do whatever. Ultimately, though, who they're going to, because the tools are there. We can talk about 128-bit encrypt. It's terribly geeky, this and that. 128-bit password to encryption. I can get tools that will enable me to crack that seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like
Wow.
that. So your SME is not likely to go up against them. But
Okay.
just
I hope not.
change your passwords. Move everything away from just admin and allow all. That would be my first piece of it.
Okay. Very, very good advice. I've got some things to do after we finish this call for sure.
Back up everything. That would be the other one. Back up everything.
Nice. So, David, coming back to CounterCraft, like it sounds like you work with some really impressive logos and names and brands. How are you guys acquiring these clients?
It's interesting. The world has changed, isn't it? So how we've found has been most effective for us has been good old fashioned word of mouth. So CISO at bank, whatever, reaches out to his network, and large organization says, "Oh, check these guys out." And comes and does, yep, we can go through a dance and prove that we can do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. They turn into a customer, and I've got one. It's like, David, here's my WhatsApp group. Here's 40 other CISOs on my WhatsApp group, and we're all telling each other, well, I bought that and it didn't work, or I bought this and it's really good, and stuff in between. And that's how that works. But I think if you talk about customer acquisition, it really changed. The last 2 years, last 3 years, it all changed. Everybody wants to educate themselves about you or the topic before they come and talk to you.
Right.
And that's different. In the good old days, it used to be, oh, come and talk to me about this and educate me. And it's not really that anymore. Buyers probably done 70, 80% of the buyer journey before they even want to talk to you these days.
Yeah. Are you finding that when people come to you, they're coming with very specific questions, or they've clearly done their research on who you guys are and they've Googled you at a very bare minimum? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that they will have done a fair degree of research. They may have got references from their peer groups. Because
Yeah.
again, we're at a level, so we're not a household name. We're not like a Hoover or a Coca-Cola or whatever. We're not a household name. So they will come to us because reference in their space says that this is interesting. Have a particular problem
Mm-hmm.
that they know that we can help with. And again, our problem is we will solve where somebody's already invested maybe a few $1,000,000 in network security, and yet the bad guys still get in. How do you know that? How do you know that to be true? That's a particularly interesting one, isn't it? So you want to research that well. Makes marketing interesting, because how do you spread the word and educate people so that when they're ready to move into that process, which is acquisition, they self-served with a whole load of information that they can ask informed questions.
Right. Yeah. It's a good question. I've worked with some enterprises in the past where the best way of doing that is through what's called education-based marketing. And there's a whole bunch of different methods that you can do. But yeah, it's all about education and reaching out with value. Have you guys experimented with any sort of outreach or, I don't know, cold calling? I guess it's not like a very good industry.
Cold calling's interesting. So outreach, most definitely. Cold calling, it's a bit of a bad rap, but it's still a good way of reaching out to people that may be in market and having those conversations. But when you come to scale, one of the statistics that people don't think about is, if you look at your customer universe, 4 to maybe 8% of that universe is in market at any time. Depressingly, 92% and greater are not. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm calling lots of numbers, looking not for a needle in a haystack, but it's less than 10% of anybody that you might talk to may be in market. Doesn't mean that the other people won't be in market in a year or 2 years' time, but
Yeah.
you're working against numbers. So you have to be really focused about, this is the benefit that I can bring you. Here's the economic return. Here's the cost saving, labor saving that I can bring. Is that worth a conversation type approach?
Mm,
Not,
mm,
you
mm.
want to buy some software? Do you want to buy some cybersecurity? That
Yeah.
died so many years ago.
I always say that's a really good insight, David. Actually, I always say that people don't like to get on a phone call to be sold something. But if you reach out with value and you help them sort of cross this awareness bridge from like problem aware to solution aware, and you can educate them on why they might need your solution, they move. We're always trying to move down the buyer's pyramid and capture the 97% of people, or the 95% of people who maybe don't even know you exist, don't know the solution exists, don't know the problem exists, and move them up to the tops. Yeah, that's I found the exact same thing.
Yeah, the other bit is I think the research says that the buying communities are interesting now to follow as well. So in the old days, everybody would like to think, well, that's Jordan, right? Jordan, he's the man with the money. All I have to do is convince him. And then you realize, well, actually, no, Jordan's got a boss. Jordan's got other people around him that be involved in the decision making. So you build this decision making community here. So it's not just you, it's this team of people. Well, that's grown by 30%. The last 2 years, that's grown 30%. Now, whether that's because people have been more cautious about their spend, whether that's people are more cautious about keeping their jobs, put it in a personal level. What happens if I mess up? So that's grown by 30%. That becomes interesting. So if you're working with an organization to see if you've got a good fit, well, all of a sudden, yeah, actually, the number of people you need to talk to starting to grow exponentially. And then you start
Mhm.
breaking those down into, are they practitioners? Are they people who have their hands on the tools? Are they the people who've got to make an economic case for deploying this or not? Are they the person who carries risk? Risk being, well, if this doesn't work, I could get fired.
Yeah.
Not only has your team got bigger, but you also need now to market to each one of those, or talk. We talk about marketing, it's actually talking, having a conversation with each one of those in terms that are relevant to them.
Mhm.
Well, if you use this as a practitioner, yeah, it's easy to deploy and we can cover all those use cases. If you're using this as somebody's hands on the tools, yeah, you know what? No, it's not going to create an extra burden for you. It's not going to mean you're going to have to work an extra 4 hours a week. And how are you going to balance the day job with this thing as well? You're not going to bury your head in the sand. It's not bad. Your economic buyer. No, you're not going to need to hire an extra 2 or 3 people. In our world, it's not going to be that you can lose 2 or 3 people. It's just they can breathe a little bit better and actually do the workload that they need to do. And then if you're the guy carrying risk, well, how do you know that everything David says to be true is? Again, I need to make you feel comfortable that these other people now feel comfortable with deploying whatever it is you're going to deploy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good insight as well. I've heard a lot of famous marketers, most recently Rory Sutherland, talk about how most people especially in business and enterprise, are more concerned with not losing their job than progressing in their career. And so they make decisions accordingly, and it's often very safe.
I think 100% true. So the bit I'd talk about would be the London financial services world, because banks have had an interesting time over the last few years as well. We always think,
Yeah.
well, was it what Clyde said? Why do you rob banks? Because that's where they keep all the money. We thought that was a super thriving industry, but
Yeah.
yeah, banks being affected by poor credit, people leasing cars and defaulting on credit cards, and interest rate fluctuations as well, which means they don't have the budget to spend on stuff to keep alive, and they don't have the budget. Then they squeeze on people. Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'd go talk to somebody in the financial services in London. Is, well, if they don't like it, I'll leave. I'll leave on Wednesday and I'll start work at new place on Monday. I just have to ring around my friends and find my next gig. That stopped. So your leverage of it, if I don't like it, I'll just move and I'll probably get paid more money if I go there. It just went. And so, yeah, that all of a sudden people become risk averse because mortgages, cost of living, raising kids, whatever your thing is, your reason for the money, your cost increased, your job security decreased. Of course, you're going to go for safer options.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, David, bringing it back to CounterCraft for a second, like if you could go back to the beginning of when you started with CounterCraft, what are some things that you might change now that you have the gift of hindsight? Would you do anything different?
Oh, it's a double-edged sword. If I was arrogant, no, I wouldn't change a thing. There's loads I'd change. I wouldn't change mission and purpose and the market and how we get to it. I think I might encourage me and the team to move faster, because I think there's a natural inclination. We made lots of changes. The worst bit about the job I have is you have to change the size of the company. Whatever euphemism, you have to let people go. And that's a rubbish thing. It's a really rubbish thing to do. People don't talk about that, but it is, because you're disturbing people's lives and families and all of those things. Yeah. But actually, you need to move quickly. There's always a human bit here. You want to be as fair to, because it's not necessarily their fault. You need to move with grace and responsibility, but still move forward and make those calls. So stuff like that. Yeah, actually, the only thing I would say is go fast. And some of my sage friends, that was their advice at the time. And you know what? They were absolutely right. You need to move fast, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is saving the greater company or impacting the greater company. So you need to move quickly. And I think I look back and I think we've done the right things, and we're starting to see all the benefits of that transition. The other bit I would talk about is probably patience, because I'm like most people and I would like to see the results now. Yeah. But the reality is you embark on a program, and it's a program of change, and that does take time to implement. And I think the bit you need to do is have the monthly check-ins, because it's really hard when you're there at the coal face to see the change that's happening around you. And I think you need to have the check-ins to say, is it moving the speed you'd like? Well, it never is, because we're all a bit A-type and we all want it to move a bit faster than it does. Yeah, but the reality is you want to be able to sit back every month and say, yeah, actually, these things are different to where they were last month, and therefore we're moving forward.
Nice. Yeah, that's some good advice there, I think, for everybody. Have some more patience, but also don't be afraid to move a bit faster with some of the decisions that you're making. Cool. David, look, I really appreciate the time today and the insights, and I think that's a perfect place to end things. If people want to check you out or they want to learn a bit more about CounterCraft, like where can they go and how can they connect?
Easy one, I think, like we got together is LinkedIn. My Brown David J, that will find me. There's only one David Brown at CounterCraft, although there's two Davids. If you search for me on LinkedIn with David Brown and CounterCraft, I'm sure you'll find me. And I'm always happy to chat to people anytime.
Perfect. I'll make sure I leave links in the description. But thank you again, David. You're definitely the first person in the sector I've spoken to. So like a real life James Bond. I'm glad you made the time to come on. So thank you very much. And thank you guys very much for watching. We will see you in the next podcast.
Take care.